Okay, you're an accident investigator. You arrive at the scene. The airplane's still burning because you just happened to be at the airport. What caused this accident? Tell me what type of accident it is. Well, it was borderline CFIT. I mean, after the airplane stalled, then it went uncontrolled. I just gave it away. It's a stall. But what caused the accident? The cause of the accident's in that picture. Huh? Well, the fire was the result of a hard impact off the airport. It was going to be an instrument flight, yes. It was. I mean, the guy was filed IFR, and he would have gotten into the clouds at about 400, 500 feet, but he never made it that far. Yeah. No. But he did have 4 people on board. He was heavy, but he was not overweight.
How strong were the winds?
They were not much because you can see the fog in the background. Nope. Nope. Yes, almost. Keep going. Unfortunate port plane. Hit the next one. You see what that's pointing to? Hit the next slide. Not that far. You see this little pitot cover? It's what happens when it's raining and you go out there and kick the tires, light the fire because you don't want to get wet doing a pre-flight. One item missed on a pre-flight. Now, should that have caused an accident? No. How many people in this room have a flight instructor that's taught them to fly by covering up the airspeed indicator, taught them to fly by sound or by power setting or by pitch attitude? Why do you do that? In the event you forget to take the pitot cover off, or what? Or you have ice, or you have something that's burrowed its way up into your pitot tube, whatever the reason. Those are the types of accidents that shouldn't happen. But it did. Now, where would this accident have not happened had the guy taken the appropriate action? First off, pre-flighting. But even after the pre-flight, and he's running down the runway. He's tapping on the airspeed indicator going, man, why isn't that needle coming off the peg? Meanwhile, he's still boring at Mach 4 down the runway. And then all of a sudden he realizes, because he's looking out the window going, I don't have much runway and I can't get any airspeed. So what did he do? He tried to make it fly rather than run off the end of the runway. These are the decisions that you make in a split second. But if you're going to make that, how many times have you flown the airplane? You know that if you rotate, you watch the artificial rise and you rotate to 10 degrees, you know you're not going to stall it. You know if you got full power, 2,500 RPM or whatever in a Cessna 172, you should be able to fly. You look out the window, you still got visual reference. Now he was going into IFR conditions. Now that was going to be ugly. So in that particular situation, I think I'd rather abort, run off the end of the runway and be on the ground rather than burying around in the clouds up there with no airspeed and having to do a partial panel type approach to get back in. Next slide. You can't really see this particular picture, but what I'm actually pointing at, or what this picture is depicting, is right there. There's a big hole in the window. Next slide, I'll show you a better picture of it. What caused that? Big bird, 2.5-pound duck. Hit the captain square in the face, just about ripped the whole left side of his face off. The airplane was on approach, doing 150 knots going into Sioux Falls, South Dakota at night. First officer had enough presence of mind when the captain basically lost all of his face and his bird exploded in the cockpit, got onto controls, was able to make a successful landing. What caused this accident? Besides a bird strike, what caused the accident? This is a pressurized airplane. How thick are the windows on a pressurized airplane? About 1.5 inches thick. That glass is pretty thick. That shattered out clean, like a bomb had come through that or a bullet had come. What caused this accident? Anybody ever fly with hot windows, tempered windows? One item on a checklist that was missed because of a distraction. These guys were at the gate. They were running the checklist. The flight attendant came forward to hand them the passenger count. She said, here's the passenger. We got 30 in the back seat on the other end. She didn't stop to listen to what they were doing. She interrupted them in a checklist. When they resumed their checklist, they forgot one item. That was the window heat. Window heat tempers the window because at high altitude that window gets cold. And that's what makes it brittle. But with window heat, that's what tempers the window to prevent this kind of thing from happening. One missed item on a checklist. How many times have you been in an airplane with somebody that's never flown before and you're running through a checklist or whatever and somebody interrupts because they want to talk and ask you about this or say this or what? One missed item just about killed that captain. You got to keep your head plugged in. If you're going into the cockpit, listen to see what the crew is doing before you start to talk. If you are the crew, then brief anybody that's going to come in, including passengers. Hey, look, I'm running through a checklist. When I'm done, I'll talk to you. One of the things that you don't want to do, which we try to do, is appease passengers by doing what? Hey, you want to be part of the program? Read the checklist. What does that do for those of us that fly ourselves quite a bit? It gets us out of our rhythm because we're used to running the checklist. And there's a high probability that you'll miss an item even with them running the checklist because they become distracted, they don't know what they're talking about, and you get out of your rhythm. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of time in my command chief. I've done it where people, you know, they go, hey, you know, I'm interested in aviation. I've handed them the checklist. And I said, okay, just read these items as I'm going through it. So they'll read brakes, and brakes checked, and they read the next item, things like that. We tended to do that to try and get them involved. It's not a good practice, though. Next slide. How many flight instructors do we have in here? When you go to fly with a student, do you brief with that student or any other student every single time you're flying with them? What's going to happen in the event of an emergency as far as who's going to fly the airplane? I'm sorry? You get killed doing that. The reason I say that is you can never assume anything, especially with a student. I don't care if they already have a pilot certificate or not. If you and I are flying and I'm a commercially rated pilot and you're teaching me, I'm getting my instrument rating. Okay, we're going to go out and drive around and I'm flying the airplane. We take off, the engine quits. What's my natural reaction going to be? I'm the pilot, I'm going to still fly. Yet you're the flight instructor and you're assuming that I'm just going to give it to you. Now we get into a fight because I'm still flying thinking I got this under control and you want control. What you can't do is assume that I'm just going to give it up. That's what happened here. Here you got a professional flight crew, TWA. You got a 25-year first officer, you got a 30-year captain. They're flying an airplane that has a known problem. The AOA probe on the right side of the airplane, which controls stick shaker for stall warning, had been written up 7 times as being malfunctioning. Every time the maintenance guys went out there to check it, it always ground opped okay, they returned the airplane. And every crew that flew that always got a stick shaker or rotation. Given the fact that they were a professionally trained flight crew, they knew they had good airspeed, good engines, keep going, and it would eventually stop. This particular flight crew read the book, saw the write-up, they even talked about it. First officer's leg, 292 people, full gas going from New York, San Francisco. They go boring down the runway, runway 14 at JFK Airport, and just at rotation as the airplane's coming off the ground, stick shaker. Captain says, you got good airspeed? The flight engineer says, you got 3 good engines, keep going. First officer says, you got it, and he let go. The captain, you know, said, I got it with a question mark. He goes, I got it, got on the controls, but the airplane had already started to descend, impacted the runway with a 2G impact, broke the right wing, and started to puke fuel out of the right wing. That's what caught the airplane on fire. So now you have this flaming ball of fire doing 170 knots down the runway, and the captain's trying to keep the airplane from going into the water at the very end. He steers it off into the infield between the runway and the taxiway, collapses the nose gear, and that airplane comes to a stop. Fortunately, the flight attendants were able to evacuate everybody out of that airplane in 3 minutes. That's what flight attendants do. But there is where an assumption happens, because the captain definitely wasn't assuming or expecting that the first officer would just give up control. And in professional pilot ranks, you never are taught to give it up. One person has it, and they take command of it. So as you as the flight instructor, if something, you have to brief your, that's why you have to brief your students. Because again, what's the first thing you're going to do when that engine quits? You're going to panic. You get into this high anxiety situation. There, I mean, I could freeze on there. You want the airplane, I'm still on it, you're going to be fighting them. But you need to have it up front here every single time. Flight crews brief. If you listen to a cockpit briefing every single time they fly, They brief what's going to happen in the event of an engine out or we have to come back to the airport. Why? Because they want it up here, not back here. That's why it's a good practice with students. In the event we take off, we lose an engine, you know, either you continue to fly or I have the airplane immediately, you get off of it. But you got to make sure that that is well known every single time you fly. Because what's the first thing you have to do to save yourself at 500 feet when the engine quits? What's the first thing, or you're going to die instantly? What's going to happen? What do you have to do and you can't even think about it? What? You got to push the nose over. What's the hardest thing for a pilot to do at 500 feet with the pavement right there? Push the nose over.